Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting of the Diversity Committee to order, please. My name is Elizabeth Velez, Chair of the Diversity Committee, and at this time I'd like to acknowledge fellow committee members Midori Valdivia, Neil Zuckerman, and Gerald Bringman for joining us today. Tracy, are there any public speakers this morning?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. We have 3 virtual speakers, and we will begin to hear their comments. They will be given 2 minutes, and we will start with Jason Anthony.
Good afternoon, Diversity Committee. Jason Anthony here. On the Monday after my 37th birthday, in the birth of Pride Month, we need more LGBT folks inside the MTA force. We know that Governor Hochul signed legislation protecting the LGBT community. The MTA needs to employ more LGBT folks. The MTA board is one example, but we need more LGBT folks in the workforce. So I hope that starting this year, the MTA will show an example for that. So that concludes my comments for this month's Diversity Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlton D'Souza.
Good afternoon, everyone. Charlton D'Souza, President of Passengers United. Unfortunately, guys, there's so much problems, in the MTA. And as an advocate, I've experienced racism and discrimination at the MTA. And it's sad because, we all come to make a difference. We all come to help. But there are certain people at the MTA who are taking advantage of the agency. And in the coming days, I'm going to be filing a major complaint against the MTA and against this 1 or 2 individuals who have ruined an opportunity for all of us. And it's not right. It's not right. And, people have a right to come to meetings. People have a right to participate, but there's a lot of discrimination going on. I'm not happy about it. And, when there's discrimination, it doesn't help the MTA because we all lose in the end. So there needs to be sensitivity training, cultural diversity, and a lot of these people that the MTA is hiring in the so-called customer advocacy positions or whatever, they need to recheck, make sure these people have, diverse backgrounds. Because this individual said something to me about the Holla station, saying there was no racism. Oh yes, there is racism. Don't tell me what I don't know. So I'm not happy. And this weekend with Pride Week, you see how bad the subway service was. That tells you everything you need to know about discrimination at the MTA, because there should have been extra trains running, should have been extra buses running, and there should have been ambassadors at stations to help people, all the tourists that came. Everything was a mess this weekend. It couldn't have been worse. So like I said, a complaint is coming, and I've been working on this for a while now, and you guys are all going to be shocked at the MTA about what's going on. And I want action taken by the Attorney General, the State Commission on Human Rights, and I want this individual fired. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll hear from Alita Dupree.
Thank you, Chair Velez. Good morning. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her. Going to talk about diversity today. I got to see some YouTube videos about Pride, and Shanifa Riera was hosting those, and we had some other guests. Q was in one of them, and Kathy Rinaldi, I think, was in another. And this is very, very good work. I've been writing on this system on and off for 53 years. And this work of highlighting diversity is really moving forward quickly due to top leadership emphasizing the importance of this. I remember about a year and a half ago, I got to come to the meetings and spoke at the diversity meeting. And it was very important, and I appreciate the welcome. So how do we continue to promote diversity? And I am hoping, I keep saying this, that I will come to see you all at a meeting in person, as I have not met some of you. But certainly the work that we did with these videos and signage, I think there'll be some decals on the trains, is showing that our subway and our other systems are open to all. How can we ensure that everybody at the MTA subscribes to these welcoming principles? So we don't want to ever have a failure of expectations. So I look forward to the diversity meeting today and hopefully seeing you all in person soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to our public speakers. Next, we have the approval of the April 24th Diversity Committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion? So moved. Thank you, Neil. Second, Midori. All in favor? Any oppositions? Minutes are approved. Tracy, can you please take us through the executive summary?
Yes, thank you, Chair Velez. Before I start, I just wanted to acknowledge the staff from DDCR. They have worked tirelessly to ensure the success of the civil rights program. So please, all of you, I appreciate all of you. Thank you. Dr. Green and I would lead the discussion. Next slide, please. In three areas. I'm going to talk about the 2023 Equal Opportunity Contracting Program. Dr. Green will take us through the Employee Resource Group, and then the first quarter 2023 update on MTA-wide EEO activities. Next slide. So for the MBE program, and I just want to emphasize that for the state's project, MWBE program, it runs from a fiscal year from April 1st to March 31st. So for last year, up until March 31st of 2023, we spent $809 million in MBE, and we're counted on payments for the state project. For the federal projects, it's based on awards. So between MWBE and SDVOB, we spent over $846 million. Now, this exceeds our goal from last year. Last year, I think we anticipated or we made 34%. This year, it's at 37%. So this is the third year, consecutive year, that the MTA has exceeded their goal on the state side. For the DBE, and we only captured the first 6 months because the DBE program runs from October 1st of a year to September 30th of the following year. So right now, that figure of the 346 million is based on 6 months of data. So right now, we're achieving a 16% goal and on a 20% goal. So we're at 16%. Why is that lower than the goal? We still have 6 months to go, but with some of the projects with design build, it's very hard for developers to identify all the firms they're going to use, as opposed to a bid build project where a developer would submit all of its utilization up front. So we hope that that number will go up, and we'll strive for that. Next slide, please. That's just showing you some of our larger awards for the state's MWBE program, and some of them for the CRC associates, which was awarded the $53 million. That was for fire system installations. We had Prutech, which was a WBE, that was electrical, and then we had Whitewood renovations, which was an SDVOB, and they did some construction finishes. So I just wanted to give some of the top awards for the MWBE state for last year, and then the bottom are subcontract awards. Next slide. And then here we have some of the top prime for the DBEs. We have an electrical company, and we have Northeast Structural, 27 million. And just keep in mind, these may not have been the original awards. This is inclusive of change orders, right? Next slide. Outreach. This is a little bit different that we did it this year. For the first, 6 months, we have outreach to 166 firms. And so the breakdown are as such, and then the far right column are firms that was duly certified. So for example, of the 166 firms, 46 were NWBE, and 3 of them were duly certified as an MBE and an SDVOB. 10 of the 160 firms were not certified. And just to give you an idea of the type of firms that are coming to our events and we're speaking with, we broke them out into the 4 categories. So commodities, construction, consulting, and 31% of them are construction companies. So it was an interesting dynamic just to see of the type of firms that we're dealing with. And hopefully the 10 firms that were not certified, we would get them certified either as a DVE or as NWBE. Next slide. Great. This is the, go back, previous slide?
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you have a viewpoint as to which we should be having more of? How much does this align with? Well, first of all, I'd ask you the basic question, which is we spend, let's just say for every $1 million we spend, what's the mix of these 4 services? Because if, for example, our MWB contractors are overweighting in one area and underweighting in another, you'd say, oh, well, maybe we should figure out how to get more of the one that's underweight, because ideally you'd want the MWBE contractors to sort of reflect the rest of the economy or the rest
Right.
of our contractors. Secondly, I guess, well, I don't really care about their personal economics that much. I'd rather have our contractors who are MWBE be in, if I had a choice, more profitable areas than less profitable areas. And so I'm going to guess, in, for example, commodities, there's not much margin. Sort of like if you own a gas station, like, you basically lose money on the gas or break even, you make money on the, the cookies and the coffee you sell, and the cigarettes, of course. So I'd be interested to know, I'm not pushing it, but if you're showing this, it'd be interesting to know, like, how, again, I'll just repeat myself, how this pie chart reflects the rest of our contractors, the non-MWBE. And then if we believe there's a difference, so again, let's say they overweight in service consulting, but most of our contractors are in construction, is that good or bad? Just worth taking a look.
Right. No, and I agree. One of the things that we're looking at are upcoming procurements, and to make sure that we have enough pool of MWBEs, DBEs to fit that. So you're right, and if we were to do that comparison, I think we would find more in suppliers, right? And or construction, but not prime opportunities, right, as sub-consultants. But noted, and thank you. Next slide. All right, so this has to deal with the certifications. And so what we did was kind of compare where we are right now versus last year at this time and day. So For the first couple of months for new applications received, last year during this time, we were at 23 new applications received. Right now, we're at 29. So we probably are on a good track to exceed the new applications received. But more importantly, the average day for firms to be certified last year was about 51 days, which under the ruling for the feds, it should be under, I believe it's 60 days. Right now, we're treading 48 days. So that's a great thing. 2022, we had 160 applications for recertification. That's just for this time period up to date. And for this period, we have 165 recertification. So we're on target to probably exceed the new applications received and to decrease the average day for firms to be certified, which is important, right? Next slide. Great. And for our small business development program, we continue to move forward with that. As you know, this is a program that has received national attention, and we are proud of the work that the program has done. Right now, it has awarded 593 contracts totaling a value of 622 million, and we assisted in securing 146 loans totaling 19 million. So we continue to work with this program and hopefully increase the success of the program. Next slide, please. One of the historic achievements on this program was that through the MTA successfully lobbying, we increased the cap of the program up to $2 million. What does that mean? That means in Tier 1, there was a cap for contracts up to $1 million. We've now increased that to 1.5. For Tier 2, it was a cap up to $3 million. That is now up to $5 million. That will allow firms to bid on and get awarded larger contracts and help their companies grow. So this was a great accomplishment by the MTA, and we are working to ensure opportunities within our program are even more accessible through our various initiatives. Next slide. Great. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Green to carry us through the rest of the agenda. Dr. Green?
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, everyone. One of the nuggets that we did receive from Transformation was a DEI tower where we were able to expand something that was fantastic and was happening in New York City Transit to agency-wide, and that's our ERG groups, our employee resource groups. I'm going to allow Barbara to talk about some of the activities of the employee resource groups for May and June.
Good afternoon. So for the past couple of months, the ERGs have been quite busy. In addition to their member meetings, elections, and mid-year planning, there have been a number of events, programs, and initiatives. I'll quickly give you a recap on. So for June, Pride Express hosted a Greenwich Village historical walking tour to celebrate Pride Month. They visited historical sites that were instrumental to the LGBTQIA+ movement. They also attended the Hastings Pride's Community Festival, which was an interactive, family-friendly event. And Pride Express was instrumental in the rollout of the MTA Pride Month Metro cards, the Pride decals on 50 M&R, 50 Long Island Railroad, and 50 New York City Transit subway cars, as well as 50 bridges and tunnel trucks. Pride Express yesterday also joined New York City Transit President Davey, the TWU Local 100 members in marching down Fifth Avenue for the Pride Parade. June was also, we celebrated Juneteenth and Begin, our Black employee group for inclusion and networking. They hosted a series of events this month. They created a video that was broadcast on all of the MTA monitors to provide the origins and the history for Juneteenth. It was also sent out in the MTA newsletter as well. In addition to this, they toured the African Burial Ground and the National Monument, and they also, while they were there, took part in the celebrations that were put on by the parks that day. For May, Transport Asian, they held a two-part documentary screening to bring awareness to the many contributions and achievements made by the AAPI community. The documentary shared the challenges and the triumphs experienced by American Asian Pacific Islanders in the United States. Latinos and Friends hosted a shadow day which provided its members with the opportunity to gain insight into their colleagues' roles, responsibilities, and special projects throughout the MTA. Job shadowing gives you a small but critical window into the day-to-day operations of their ideal careers. The Veterans ERG held a noontime Memorial Day observance on May 17th at 2 Broadway to remember those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. The guest speaker was Patrick Warren, MTA's Chief Security Officer and retired Army Colonel. And the Abilities Group, in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month in May, hosted a forum to discuss mental health challenges. Work-Life Services and Employee Assistance Program were also available to offer their services and support to employees. And lastly, in commemoration of Jewish American Heritage Month, the MTA, in collaboration with the Museum of Jewish Heritage, held a conversation with Holocaust survivor Maritza Shelley and Marge Ginsburg, MTA Deputy Chief Technology Officer. Maritza Shelley shared her stories and her personal experiences, and employees were able to join in paying tribute to the generations of Jewish Americans who helped form the fabric of the American history, culture, and society. Thank you.
We are very excited about the employee resource groups. We have 9 right now. We have 3 other groups that are wanting to start. And the employees volunteer their own time to actually initiate the activities that are going on and to participate. So we're very proud of our employees, and this is a great form of employee engagement. Next slide, please. So we're going to turn our attention now to the workforce activities. As of March 31st, the MTA workforce was comprised of 71,718 employees, of which 19% were female and 72% were minority. 3% were veterans, and 1% identified as an individual with a disability. We do believe that we have many more employees that are individuals with disabilities, but these are people who are self-identified, and so that's a volunteer act. When compared to first quarter 2022, our net female representation has increased by 580 employees, and our net minority representation has increased by 1,847 employees. The complete report of workforce activities can be found in the diversity book on pages 85 through 98. Page 90 gives a detailed demographic breakdown of all employees by agency. Next slide, please. Now, we actively monitor agency-wide hires and separations. During the first quarter, MTA hired 1,463 employees. When we take separations into account, this resulted in an increase of 212 females and 523 minority employees. Next slide, please. So during the last couple of diversity committees, we talked about the different civil rights programs that we administer in DDCR. The programs highlighted in green are our federal programs. The programs highlighted in red here are our state programs. Today, we're going to be focusing on our Equal Employment Opportunity Program which is required to be updated and submitted to FTA on July 31st this year. Now, as we begin to talk about the update of the EEO program, we want you to remember that we have reset and we have began to look at the workforce composition as it has changed since transformation. So there's not going to be a comparison of the last year's numbers or the last program because the workforce composition has changed. So we don't really report agency-wide because if we reported agency-wide, whatever happens at New York City Transit will be what we're reporting because there's 50,000 employees at New York City Transit and it would overshadow the activity in the other agencies. So as we go forward here, we're going to talk a little bit more about the update of the Equal Opportunity Program, and we'll be talking about agency-specific numbers. Next slide, please. So as we all know, Title VI is a federal law that applies to employees with 15 or more employees, while federal transit law applies to programs and activities receiving federal funding. We are obligated to update and submit a Equal Employment Opportunity Program under Title VII and under federal transit law. Next slide, please. The MTA is required to submit this program to the FTA every 4 years. The program contains an analysis of the workforce to identify jobs and departments where minorities and females are underrepresented or over-concentrated. Now here we show what the required elements of the EO program are, and that is a statement of policy, dissemination of policy, and that we are equal employer, equal opportunity employer, the designation of a person responsible, that would be the EO officers, and part of that responsibility includes the investigation of allegations of discrimination, concurrence on hires, promotions, and any lateral movements within the agency, collecting and analyzing employment data and identifying problem areas, and serving as a liaison between the agency, federal, state, and local government regulatory agencies. It also requires that we conduct an unutilization analysis, and from that analysis that we determine goals and timetables, that we look at all of our employment practices and give an assessment of those practices, and that we set up monitoring and reporting systems to report on the areas of compliance under the EEO program. I'm going to, at this time, turn it over to Alana. She's our Director of EEO, to talk about our underutilization analysis and how we came about those figures.
Thank you. Good afternoon, distinguished members. The first step in us determining whether or not we have underutilization, which is a word you've heard over and over again, is for us to actually calculate an estimated availability analysis. And to do that, we take outside information available, occupational data from the census. We look at our internal movements internally. You put that together, you weight some data, and it gives us what is our expected representation that will then be compared to what our actual representation is at any given snapshot. The next slide, please. The internal availability, it looks at the titles that logically flow or could usually flow where we would supply those particular workers that have the skills necessary for a new position that is available. When we are reviewing that internal data, we identify those current employees that are available either through promotion, transfer, or to be trained for any future opportunities and openings that are happening. We consider those job groups and those titles, those are becoming known as our feeder positions. And those feeder positions that could reasonably feed or promote into any recruited position that we have. Those are the ones that we would be targeting at that time. Just to give you a little bit more of a visual, on the right-hand side, it gives some sample titles, and it gives what might be a logical progression. You'll notice you have an engineer intern, then an engineer 1, engineer 2, the next level, senior engineer, all the way up to the chief. And if you follow that logic, that's basically what we're trying to identify, those lines of progression. Next slide, please. To do that, we have to identify and establish what is our geographical reasonable recruitment area. And what we do is we take a snapshot of our workforce, look to see where they currently are, our service areas that we provide, and we, last year, were able to actually purchase from the census, U.S. Census, some customized tables to make sure that our data is presented even more accurately. That reasonable recruitment area tells us from where you might likely pull a person in order to fill a vacancy, and it helps us to identify what the availability by race and gender are according to a classification code for your occupation. The most current information that we are using was the one that was released last year by U.S. Census, and that is the 2014-2018 Census EEO tabulation. We are required to use the most current information, and so we are using that at this time. When I mentioned that we purchased the information from the census, you can see on the right-hand side the areas that were customized strictly for MTA because we have unique needs. If we can go to our next slide, please. On that next slide, we just gave a sample, just a random sampling of some titles that fall within our EEO categories. As Dr. Green has already mentioned, we underwent a transformation. It really restructured a lot of the positions and titles that we had here at MTA. I don't want to read through the list, but you can glance at it at your leisure. Can I go to the next slide, please? So going back to this term, underutilization, what exactly is it? Well, underutilization is basically when we have in our workforce a representation that is less than what we are expected to have based on the utilization rule that you use. Now, the FTA does require us to use a whole person underutilization rule, and simply what that means is when determining underutilization, we are looking at whether or not steps are required, of course, to remedy that shortfall. But we're looking specifically to see if the availability exceeds the workforce by one person. We look at the numerical goals and see if the numerical difference is at least by one person. It's expressed in percentages, as you see here, but declaring it is just simply that the availability exceeds what we have in our workforce by at least one whole person. So on this particular slide, this is our official and administrators. This is our category 1, and you'll notice on this slide that there's underutilization predominantly in the Hispanic population of our workforce. This is these are the positions where we have our utmost, our presidents, our chairs, all of our managers and so forth, and it is highlighted in this area. If we can go to the next slide, please. Yes.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So I just want to make sure I understand professionals, this category, or I'm sorry, the category before.
Officials and administrators.
Yes. Can you give me an example of like some titles in this world? Because I'm just trying to, is it just, give me some titles
So
to
I will-
understand a little bit
I
more
will
about.
start by the short definition. It would be everyone from the top executive to any title that has assistant manager in it.
Okay, so it's really, would it be correct to say they're like managerial executive leadership? Like we're
Yes.
talking executive leadership to high-level managerial.
It would even be assistant manager, so
Okay.
anyone with a manager in the title. So it would, I
So
would say
any
mid-level.
manager. Yeah, so mid-level to high-level
Yes.
is officials and administrators. And under here, what I heard is that Hispanic and Latino is underutilized in BTA, bus, HQ, LIRR, M&R. Is
That
that
is correct.
Okay. BTA is bridges and
and
tunnels.
tunnels.
Okay, I just want to
It
make
is.
sure I understand.
And what you see
Okay.
upon your screen is that is predominantly Hispanic males that are underutilized. And for our blacks, we also have underutilization for males. Those are the
Right.
predominant areas on the screen.
Tell me a little bit about HQ, because the percentages seem really low. I just want to, just walk me through HQ Hispanic. That means that,
That means that for the estimated availability, the information that had come from the census for titles and occupational codes in that area, it was about 4% that we were expected to have. And our representation that we had in that category was about 3%. And
Okay,
so
I
when you're
see, I see.
looking at the numerical difference between the two, if the numerical difference between the two is at least 1, then it would be highlighted in green.
I see, so that's all, okay.
And you're actually going to see, you touched upon something that you're going to see in the upcoming screens. If we can go to the next slide,
Yes,
please.
thank you.
Sure. In this slide, in professionals, we just have shaded in green, still in bridges and tunnels. We have black males, and we have more white females that are highlighted in this particular area as being underutilized. The only areas that excuse me, that showed for bridges and tunnels was black males, and then everything else that's in this category is white males. No other agency had underutilization for any of the ethnic minorities in that group. If we can go to the next slide, please. Now, in technicians, this is where you start to see that next to some of those numbers, if you see along the lines of C and D, you may see an asterisk in the first column and the second column. Do you see that? Okay, so what that is that's indicative of our use of the whole person rules as federally required to do. And what that says is that even though our actual percentage is appearing less than the estimated availability, remember I said it is expressed in percentages, but we're really looking at the numerical difference. And if the numerical difference is at least by one person where what's expected is greater than what we have, that's when it's underutilized. So although the percentage appears less, if the difference numerically was not by 1, then it is not considered underutilized, it's not declared, and we are not required to then establish any specific efforts to remedy that shortfall. Next slide, please. Protective service, you'll see some of those asterisks again. And this is usually because the job group or the job category is a pretty small category. Statistically speaking, most of the categories, when you want to have meaningful analysis, you need at least 30. And a number of them of what we've had are like 9 or 23. So those numbers are really small. So even when you take the percentages, you're not really seeing that difference. Also, what's going on in protective services where we have some differences in our female groups that have been identified. There are a lot of male-dominated positions that are in this particular category. Next slide, please. More of the same in our paraprofessionals, really had very small head count that attributed to whether or not we would deem underutilization or not. And so this theme just kind of continues throughout the next and remaining slides. And so if you don't have any specific questions, we can turn it over in the essence of time. Anything that has been deemed underutilized, though, is shaded in green for your reference. If you don't have any other questions for me at this time, that will conclude my portion of the presentation.
We can go ahead and go through the other 2 slides.
Oh, we can. Okay. So when we look at skilled craft, we know that throughout the country, we predominantly have positions in trades, your plumbers, your welders, and things of that nature that are most likely to be male-dominated. So MTA is not by itself in finding, we're on service maintenance. Can we just back up one more to skilled craft, please? In skilled craft. So you'll notice that the highlighted in green does show where we are underutilized in this particular area, but you don't really see any asterisks. So in these areas, the differences that are observed, there are more than one person that is resulting in a difference. And I do have I did have a number with me. I wanted to put it in perspective for you, but unfortunately, I've misplaced that document. But you can have a difference where on the paper, it may be like a 0% versus a 1%. But given the large head count that are in our skilled craft, and the next slide for service maintenance, we're in the thousands of employees that represent those numbers. The shortfall could be represented by hundreds of numbers. And so it may look as if it's a 0% to a 1%, but it may actually be 100 more or 500. It depends on the size of the group in particular. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the last of our 8 categories is service maintenance, and service maintenance is more of the same. We do see that we have predominantly in green the Hispanic and Latino population again, and that is predominantly those positions that are labor. These are our conductors, our bus drivers, and things of that nature. And so you'll notice in bus in particular, our bus operatives would be in this particular category, and so the only 2 areas where they have had deemed underutilization is both for Latino females as well as for white females. In transit, again, it's also for our Hispanic population, and then we have some green showing as well as in Metro North. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so the next slide just basically tells a little overview of our process where we identify specific job groups and titles that have underutilization. We collect the information, try to conduct a target outreach to help us to be successful in remedying any shortfalls that we'll find. That's where you're going to create those unique outreach and goals that we have, how we may use something internal, how we can retain, how we can recruit, even if we had to create something. This is where the agency has a lot of flexibility in terms of how we would go about remedying those shortfalls. And then we have our monitoring, tracking, and reporting, which is a new area that we are going to be creating in order to be compliant with our obligations under the EEOP.
Thank you, Lana. Great information. Chair Velez?
Thank you. And I'm going to echo Tracy's appreciation for the staff and everything that you've done. I know that as we move into next month, we'll have even more information available, a more robust reporting that's going to be happening. Are there any other questions for any of the information that was presented today? Okay, well then, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Midori? Second by Neil, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.